Good morning, once again. Don't forget our YouTube. This morning I want to go back as far as 1965. And that's when I started my life with the Columbans. I went into the training house we had in Sassafras in the Dandenongs in those days. And there we learnt a bit about prayer. And one of the things I learnt there, and it stayed with me all the time, and I'm very grateful for it, is that God is Abba, that God relates to us as a loving Father. And I suppose that is why I was very attracted to one of the chapters in a book by Skillebeck's, back a few years now, but where he gave a chapter speaking to the fact that Jesus had an Abba experience, an experience that transformed his life. Jesus' Abba experience. Now we must remember that Jesus was a very pious and faithful practicing Jew from Galilee, a province in the north of his country. And he believed, of course, in Yahweh, the God of the Jews, the God who had chosen the Jews as his favorite people, but also a God who was creator, who was liberator, who was provider, who was source of life, and who had a covenant with his people. But on top of this, Jesus came to realize that God was also Abba, Father, Daddy, Pa, Pop, Dad. God was all of this. And Jesus, whether he came to it gradually throughout his life, or whether it was a sudden insight, as would be expressed in Mark's Gospel of the Baptism, where the voice from heaven says, "You are my beloved Son. In you I am well pleased." Which one it was, we don't know. But it was obviously something that was very real and very pertinent for Jesus. In fact, Skillebeck would say that it was probably the most transformative experience of his life. I'm not going to argue with Skillebeck. So it's no surprise when one of the disciples comes to Jesus and asks, "Lord, teach us to pray, just as John the Baptist taught his disciples to pray." And so Jesus says immediately, "Okay, when you pray, say, 'Father, may your name be held holy, may your kingdom come,' etc." And he starts off with the word Father in our translation, but which according to Jesus' teaching should be Abba, which is the Hebrew for Daddy, Pop, Pa, Dad, an intimate term. And that's what Jesus tried to communicate with and share with his disciples, because it was central to him. And he wanted them to be aware of this phenomenal relationship. Because if God was loving Father, they were loved sons, just as he was. And as we know, God loves infinitely. So if he loves the Son, this Son, Jesus, he also loves his disciples, as Jesus said. And he loves us with an infinite love. And that's what I hope we can come to realize too as disciples today, that this same God who loved and loves Jesus with an infinite love, loves and loves us with that same love. You can't parcel out an infinite love. If it's half infinity, it's still infinity. If it's 1/100th of infinity, it's still infinity. So God's love for us as disciples today is the same as his love for Jesus and his love of Jesus now. So that's something that I hope we might come to be able to appreciate. I know it's difficult, and I've struggled with it, because we tend to throw in, "I'm not worthy." That's my criteria. It's not God's. My worthiness or non-worthiness can be an impediment I place on the infinite love of God coming to me. And I want to finish with just a little exercise that I learned recently from a fellow called James Finley. He's a mystic, a lecturer who was 6 years in the Trappist monastery under the famous Thomas Merton, is now teaching and lecturing around the world. And he finished up his talk one day that I happened to see, saying a little exercise he'd give us. And that is, on the in-breath, take in the words, I love you. And that's God saying to us, I love you. And then on the out-breath, you can say, and I love you. And so you can do this rhythmic breathing and praying when you're lying in bed, when you're walking to the train, when you're sitting in the park, when you're going shopping. Whatever you like to do, you can pray this, I love you and I love you. See how it goes. And please God, it'll help you a little as it helped me. God bless.